IWAR Network TUBECAST. I'm your host, Alex G., your NWL Commissioner. With me, as always, is Maniac Matt Riley. How you doing tonight, Matt?
I'm maniacal, I tell you. I'm very maniacal.
All right, fantastic. Tonight we're going to talk about my favorite subject, trash talk. And we're going to go over some of the basics of trash talking, why it's effective, Matt, can you tell us the genesis of trash talk a little bit?
Sure. I mean, when the IWA first started, one of the things they talked about to emphasize the game was kind of create a character. Like if you play Dungeons and Dragons, you have a character, a fighter, and you have exchanges. Well, if you watch wrestling at any point in your life, you saw wrestlers come out and cut promos, and they'd be like, I'm calling you out, I'm Mr. Wrestling too, or some wrestlers come out and insult the fans. Well, similarly, in the IWA, you want to create your wrestler and you want to have feuds and angles and things that kind of give your character life. The better you involve yourself, the more the game will be enjoyable, I believe. The characters you create help give the game a better overall feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of the basics of trash talk is making sure that, you let everyone know, where you stand in terms of your, denomination, I guess is the appropriate word for that, whether you're, a babyface or you're a heel. Some of your basic characteristics for your wrestler, where they're from, your height, your weight, where you train, what kind of style you have, so everyone gets to know, who your wrestler is. One of the big things is, like, if everyone knows who what your wrestler is all about, you're going to have more interaction. They're going to understand, where you're coming from in terms of your wrestler. So you don't have a babyface, sneak attacking another babyface, and they don't know that they're babyfaces, kind of
Sure.
deal here. So, which I've seen happen. So, I feel that early on, when when you're doing your first couple of trash talks, again, that's where you want to go. You want to go with personal character development. You want to talk about one of the things I give advice to is just comment on some of the events, the current events in the league. If so and so sneaked attacked another wrestler, talk about it. Say, oh yeah, they got that bum, so we know you're a heel, or like take umbrage with that. So that heel attacked the babyface, and you're a babyface. You're like, oh, we have to get that guy. This guy doesn't belong here. He's attacking people in the parking lot. I mean,
Right.
those are some of the things right off the bat that you can get your wrestler out there and kind of get him known. As we go on, we'll talk about more kind of advanced tactics and trash talk in general. But I think for your first couple of interviews or promos, depending on how you want to frame it, and I'll give you a little story. When I started with Luther Alexander in the beginning, I would do videos. The framing of my trash talk would be a YouTube video, and it'd be Luther
Yes.
cutting a promo on a YouTube video, and that's how I would frame it. It'd be on the NWL.com, I think I called it at the time, and that was a really interesting way and something that no one else was doing to kind of get attention. And he would do this thing where he would go around the world, because at first, the Luther of back then is not the Luther of now.
Right.
So Luther of back then, he was someone who wanted to travel the same paths of legends. He was a world warrior, so to speak, sort of like Ryu in Street Fighter. So you go to place, fighting all the top fighters and coming up on top and then moving on. His gimmick to start was traveling from place to place, and it'd be wrestling monuments, I guess you would call them. So he would go to Double Cross Ranch and
Yep.
in Texas. He would go to Stone Mountain, Georgia. He would go to the French Alps with Andre. He would go to Arena Mexico in Mexico, and he would do his interviews from there. And that's where we kind of got started with that. It really gave an opportunity for everyone to see what he's all about. And then the last promo I did like that was the one in Russia, in the Russian training facility where the Koloffs were training or had trained, and he picked up a rusty Russian chain, because Russia's, again, at that point, it's not the Soviet Union anymore, and it fell apart. So he's in an old dilapidated training facility, and that's when someone got the idea that he was Russian, apparently, and so I took it from there. That's when we did the switch of his character. So again, it's very important to kind of whittle it down to where it's simple for people to understand. People understand your character, and
Right.
you don't want to be too meta on it. You want to keep it simple, especially to start, and then you kind of progress as you go along. What is some of your tips, Matt, about basic trash talk?
I always go to when I was at Killer Kowalski's Pro Wrestling School,
Yeah.
and they told me about the character you create in the ring, or like they tell like promo training. Three things they talked about: who are you, what do you want, and what are you willing to do to get it. I think every promo should have some kind of hint of that flavor. In the IWA, when you submit trash talk, whether you do it as a one page, a little blurb, or even a few lines. What is it we're reading? Is it compelling us to know more? I always have things down like, for example, who your wrestler is can be more than just their name. Like if you're the Detroit Mangler and your finisher's like, the Rock City Bomb or whatever, it's like, okay, well, where are you going with this character? There was a character in the LWL, one of my favorite guys I marked out for was called Johnny Canuck. And his gimmick was he wanted to shake everyone's hand. And he was a heel. And he just wrote these really simple promos, but he played off how bad he was by shaking people's hand. Or you refuse to shake my hand? And that gimmick alone set the tone. I always feel it's good. Your promo should always do a few things like call somebody out or challenge somebody to come after you. Because you call somebody out, and it can be one person, you can make one promo about one person and just say, I'm calling you out, and I'm going to beat you because I'm going to do this. Or it can be calling, I challenge anyone, try to beat me in under 10 minutes, like put a tone out.
Or you can be like Luther and talk about 10 guys in your trash talk.
Right.
And
well, that's the thing.
It's casting a wide net, you know what I mean? It's casting a wide net. So I'm not going to get frustrated if 2 or 3 people don't respond back because I know I want to have 6 people in my pocket that's going to say something back to me.
And that brings up a good point, what we would like to refer to as, don't get frustrated by people who don't respond. Like, for example, I used to use the wide net approach with Bodacious Brad Blaze, Hot Stuff Adam Cash. I still do it to a degree. Atari for a long time. When I had the Teamster in the NWL, he was there purely to stir the pot. So you remember him because you were there at the time.
Yep.
And I had 2 things going for him. One was the Teamster Challenge, where we challenged anyone in the league to win a tag title or 6-man title with him, and they win this running pool of matches. And who was the first person to win it with him? Luther Alexander.
Damn right it was. I remember being pissed because Teamster never talked about him. He would talk about, talk crap about this person, he would talk crap about that person. He never mentioned Luther's name, and I just get so mad. Like, what do I have to do to get this guy's attention?
And that's the thing, though, with the Teamster is, like, he was always so self-absorbed. And when I made with the Teamster, he was a character who believed he was the best tag team wrestler in the world.
Yeah.
And yet he was always calling people out. And, like, you got to realize, too, sometimes it's as simple as just calling somebody a jerk. And there was a wrestler called the True Wrestler, DC Hannon, run by Derek Hannon, who's on Facebook, and I always try to get him to come back. But we had this feud where teams just made fun of him every month. And he was like, you're a jerk. Or the punchline would always be, yeah, like that jerk, DC Hannon. And even now, if you go to the Willowwick Classic page, the Teamsters accomplishments talk about people and mention the jerk, DC Hannon.
Yep.
But again, one thing to keep in mind with your character and the way you create them is that this isn't like there's a catalog of your trash talk available. So keep in mind that when you trash talk, if you establish yourself as a villain, you've got to kind of keep that going in each promo, or vice versa for a hero. Because a lot of players who maybe join the league will go, oh, this guy sounds like a face, and attack you thinking you're a good guy when actually you're a bad guy. Or you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things you got to keep in mind there's a rolling approach to the game. Some players will read your promos and understand that you're a bad guy. Or a good guy. Some people don't care. As a whole, the IWA is very heel heavy, very bad guy heavy.
It's funny we talk about heel heavy. I mean, they're heels, but they're not heels because they're a little cookie cutter. When you talk about a heel promo, what's going to set you apart is a sneak attack. Is that going to set you apart because everyone's sneak attacking each other because everyone's a heel? So what's going to make you elevate from that point? And then as heels, you want to look for that baby face that you can have that interaction, that you can have that feud with. In terms of that, heel promo, you definitely want to say, the basics of, character development, and you want to look at your own character. So when I look at Luther, what are some of his core qualities? He cheats. Right. He's a liar. And he's crazy. One of the things I do to generate some sort of, reaction is when someone beats me the cycle before, I'll just lie and said I won. And that person gets so mad, and it gets the proper reaction. So that's what I'm looking to do. His character is to make people mad, and that's kind of his shtick. His shtick is upsetting people any way he can. So he would be wearing everything about Luther is trying to get heat. From the song that he comes into the ring with, which is "Living in America," he's clearly Russian. He wears the red, white, and blue trunks. Again, clearly Russian, and. Everything he does, every word that comes out of his mouth is trying to get heat. So from a villain's point of view, that's what you want to strive for. You want to strive to, get as much heat as possible, trying to get the reaction. And sometimes sneak attacks are not enough. You got to kind of drive the point home with those. So just hitting someone in the back of the head with a chair Okay, that's great. Hitting someone in the back of the head with a chair and then painting them yellow, that's gonna get more of a reaction.
Right, and that's the thing too, is that when you have, like escalating attacks, like it's funny because I talked about people ignoring your stuff. Like in one league, for example, I set up this angle where I had a guy come in and he laid the foundation for 3 cycles, warning no one in particular, but saying, look, you know who you are, you need to leave the league now. So 3 cycles of him warning and giving you one more chance to get out of the league. I've been paid to take you out. You know who you are. Get out now. And by that 4th cycle, when he attacked someone, and just destroyed his whole little set for his interview show. It really set the tone up. And the thing is, though, it built up, and then all of a sudden, disappears.
Yeah.
Disappears, and it's like, what, dude? And I was told by the commissioner of this league that this particular player had been lamenting no one really worked with him, and he was literally frustrated. And I thought, well, okay, here we go. I give you a ready-made feud, and it's frustrating. I'm going to see it out, and then I'm going to go from there. But I always tell people, if you set your sights higher, think about it. You can go after certain champions. You can go after a certain belt and say, I don't care who you holds the title, the Southern title. I'm the man in the South. I'm going to hold that belt. Or it could be the commissioner's champion. I don't care what I got to do to get a shot. I'm demanding the commissioner. I demand a shot. Because a lot of times commissioners, if they at least see somebody interested in their title and talking about it, they'll try to give you a chance to earn that shot.
Absolutely.
Somehow. In my experience, I've found that. Because they'd rather have somebody talking about their title than just carrying and ignoring it.
Yeah.
Which we can talk about commissioner's titles another scene. But I'm just kind of give you some ideas that it could be I have the best finisher, no one can break it, or I can pin anybody in a certain amount of time, or whatever it may be. There's ways to play off that. Trash talk wise, being a heel, you can attack people, you can do absurd, crazy stuff, but being a face can really be a challenge, especially in IWA. Because you've got to realize, what makes your character a baby face. When I first created Senior Lucha, I kind of patterned it after this wrestler called the Blue Demon Jr. in, I think it was CMLL at the time, or maybe it was AAA. But he was like this classic masked hero. And I just wanted to build a classic good guy. So I had him do his promos from the cheap seats. Because there's a lot of guys who do seat promos. They're always in the front row, or they're always surrounded by fans and security. He did his promos up in the rafters. He used to walk out into the fans. Like he'd walk down the aisle, then cross into the cheap seats in the BBL where he started. And I'd do these promos where he was talking with the fans, and they were all excited. He'd take his belt, and he'd have a fan wear the belt to the ring with him. Doing things that, a good wrestler would do to kind of get the fans involved. And I know that the Steve Austins have really shifted some of the good guy expectations.
Big time.
The Rock, Mankind, kind of or Shawn Michaels, what you see as a good guy versus a bad guy. And understand that you can do those kind of wrestlers and have those kind of feuds. But one of the ways you get there is by building your character up. There was a wrestler called Damien and a wrestler called the Role Model Jimmy Digital. And I always use them as an example of two guys who are both really good writers that went head-to-head and poured into their feud.
Jimmy Digital, another tag team partner of Luther Alexander, actually won the NWL Tag Team Championship. So I just want to throw that out there. So,
what, are you pulling the Teamster move now?
No,
but they had a really good feud, and it went to a finale. And it was such a well-written feud that afterwards they were kind of like, well, how can we top this? And that's one thing I always say, keep in mind for your character is, if your character starts in point A, like Luther Alexander was a good guy and kind of evolved into the Soviet super bad guy.
Yeah.
Like Dick Jackson, Mad Dog Dick Jackson was the Masked Marvel, then he was Captain Redneck Dick Jackson, then he was Dick the Dog Jackson, and he was always fighting bad guys. And then he had a feud with Frank Leatherman Snow, where Frank Snow kind of mentored him and made him like the Leatherman, turned him into the Mad Dog to make him tougher to fight tougher bad guys, and that's why he became Mad Dog Dick Jackson.
So imagine the day where I turn Luther and how big of a deal that's going to be.
Well, that's another good point. Huge. It's like when a wrestler turns, people often say like, well, I want to turn on somebody. Well, if you just join up for a cycle and turn on them, no big deal.
Yeah.
But really, a turn can be effective. If someone comes out and says, like you mentioned earlier, like a bunch of bad guys are running around running things like crazy, right? Get together with some other faces and go, look, I'm going to join forces with so-and-so. We're going to take you out.
Yep.
And you pull that together, and then a few cycles in, you turn on them. You join the bad guys. One of the great ways to get the feuds to have a little more believabilities and sustainability is to actually talk to the other players. One of the things about the game that really is fun to think about is back when I was playing in the late 80s, early 90s, is we didn't have the internet. So we just wrote letters to each other sometimes, and other times the really good players just played off what you gave them. And that's one of the most important aspects of trash talk is playing off what others give you. So for example, if someone comes out and says they're going to take your eye and they attack you and brutalize you and they go after your eye and leave your eye all bruised and swollen, if you write your next promo wearing an eye patch and vowing to get revenge and saying you're going to get them back, you're playing off that attack. If they came out and they attack somebody or friends with, come your guy come out and clear the ring and saving that guy, a good move. If you ignore the TT of other players, it's one thing if it's like ridiculous and stupid, like there was a lightsaber attack once where I was like, really, dude,
Didn't they chop off Atari's head on that one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? And it was like a kid. The kid was terrible, anyways. But like, also like, I always say, if you do a ridiculous attack, add a little bit of believability. There was an attack I did once. Rick Riley cut a promo, and Superstar Rick was basically burned out. And this grandson of a wrestler he feuded with in the 80s and 90s came back to like get him. The kid playing that wrestler was kind of playing this stupid gimmick. So to insult him and kind of drive up the stakes, Rick Riley threw him off the roof of the BRL arena. But he threw him into a dumpster. So I didn't throw him off the arena and just like leave him on the side of the street dead. I made it believable that, okay, well, he threw him off but he landed in a dumpster. So he didn't die. That's where, like, one guy I remember attacked Frank Snow with a wood chipper. It was like, really? Like, one guy, like, he burned down the commissioner's office. And the thing was, it wasn't a bad thing to do, but you can't do that 2 cycles into a feud.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's another aspect you should bring up feud is escalation. You can't just start at 100. You got to kind of rev your way up. And a good example of that is a wrestler called the Baddest American Biker. And if he's out there, hey, buddy. 2 things he does that are a lot of fun. One, he does the same exact promo every cycle except for 1 sentence. So he has a paragraph he puts out every cycle. He changes 1 or maybe 2 sentences. I won't even read the whole promo, but one thing he does too is he challenges people every cycle, somebody new, to a Hell in a Cell, steel cage, no disqualification, no holds barred, bloodbath, like this ridiculous match. Well, the problem is when you start at 100, you have nowhere to go but down.
Yep.
You've got to kind of stuff to build up to. Luther has had some really good feuds in different leagues because you've got space and you give and take. That's another thing too. You can't just take. You've got to give back. If you're a bad guy, you got to expect to either lose the match or if you win, build off that win.
Yeah. You got to show your ass. So I've written sneak attacks where I lose, where I literally wrote sneak attacks for other people. So if someone came in and beat up Luther and leave them in a heap, I've done scenarios where I go to sneak attack someone and fail.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the give and take on that, which is super important. Number one, it might spark someone else's creativity. So if someone's not kind of getting it, and you do something where their wrestler beats you up, now they're more apt to work with you.
Right, and you can also play things off too, like set up a challenge match. Have an angle start off where you have someone come in to save you and go, we're going to challenge you guys to the next pay-per-view or a series. One thing that's popular, some players will challenge people to a series, so they have a best of 7 match. And the idea is that grudge match. I always think back to the 80s, Magnum TA versus Nikita Koloff at a best of 7 series. And they went back and forth. And I remember thinking at the time, like, they should do this more often, like to build up a drama. And you don't really see it ever. Like maybe once in a blue moon, someone challenged someone like a best of 3 series or something like that.
I think there was a Benoit Booker T one WCW.
Was there? Yeah, I mean, but it's so rare. And one point you say, well, it's hard for those guys to put together a good series of matches. Not all the guys don't have the talent to do that. I think a lot of the guys do have the talent. They just give them the material to work with.
Yeah, agreed.
I believe in the IWA. What I mentioned in the last TUBECAST about if you play for the strategy, you play for the trash talk, or play for both. If you play for the strategy and look a big roster player and you're only interested in one thing, pretty much after the holds come out, the results come out, you got nothing else to play for. You don't care about the TT's there, but it's extra. If you're a creative player and you don't really care about the holds, well, that's fine, but everyone wants to win.
Yep.
That's one thing I'm hearing a lot. Like, well, guys like that shouldn't expect to win world titles. I don't care what game you play. I don't care. You want to be the best. You want to win it. It could be Madden. It could be Tekken. It could be Street Fighter, League of Legends, whatever it may be. IWA. You want to win. Now, the trash talk I find is a great component because it's sort of like a consolation prize. You know what? This month I had shitty strategy in this league, but some great things developed.
Or you beat that one guy that you needed to beat, and you're excited about that.
Right, and that's the thing too. You can talk about the results. Keep in mind when you trash talk, you're talking about the stuff that happened before. It's hard to kind of predict. Every so often I'll see players say, I'm going to come out and win the title, and it's like they don't. It's like, oh, it's embarrassing. But, if you take the approach that I'm going to create this character and make them fun to read. I remember one of my favorite NWL wrestlers was a guy called Koenig. Now, Koenig, if I'm saying it right, Andy will let me know. He's now the commissioner of the CWL. His character, Koenig, was this really well-written character. He was funny to read. He was sarcastic. He made good promos. He was a great babyface character because he didn't come out and attack anybody, but he had this whole, business angle, kind of like a pre-Brock Lesnar, all business, come to the ring, athletically, imposing.
He had a show too, right?
Yes. And what's funny is I still think of him every time Wayward Son comes on at work, which is all too often. Yeah. But the idea I'm saying is that, if you build up an entertaining enough character, people will want to read and see what you have to say. And a lot of players, if you call them out, they'll respond. That's why, the broad net approach isn't a bad thing to do. The one thing I would suggest is the broad net can backfire when you have too many fingers and too many pies.
Yep.
If you have 8 feuds going at once and the pay-per-view's coming up, you got to fight somebody. Well, who do you fight? The way we book pay-per-views in the BRL is you kind of go off of the best trash talk and people that have actually mentioned. One guy was mentioning in his trash talk 3 different matches for one pay-per-view. Pick one. Just pick one guy or one team, make that your feud of note.
That can be your money feud, and then
right.
You have auxiliary feuds going on the side, but you got to pick one money feud.
Exactly. I would also say, too, is that catchphrases are helpful.
Awesome. We usually do. All right, thumbs up. Ready, guys? Let's do this.
Leroy Jenkins. Or, Mad Dog Dick Jackson says, Woo Jack. Senor Lucha says, Farai. I'm Senor Lucha. There's always something, and it's a matter of a catchphrase is fun. I've seen some guys like Rude Duty says, aight, and I know that off the top of my head because every one of his promos ends with aight,
And it's funny, as a heel, Luther will steal the catchphrase and say it back to them. So, yes. Business is booming. He used that when he's told, Johnny Revolution's get back to work because he's a liar and a cheater and he steals.
And again, you'd be surprised how effective it is just to talk nonsense in the sense of, the Teamster used to come out and just ignore the fact he lost matches. He lost a loser leaves NWL match to DC Hannon and came back as the Midnight Teamster, which was just him in a mask with his stupid shirt on, and the shirt had a mask on his shirt. It was a fun gimmick, and that's why the Teamster's still around, because he's a fun character to write.
The picture, though. You got to paint the picture of the shirt. He's wearing the mask. His shirt has his face on it, which is also wearing the mask.
Yes. And that's the thing. It's about having fun, and what's funny is the IWAR Alliance, the BRL, CWL, IWL, and NWL, we focus on the trash talk as part of a primary way of enjoying the game. And that's why in the NWL we really breathe life into that kind of part of the game, and it's not for everyone. And we should mention this too. You don't have to write a full page.
No.
You don't have to write a half page. But give us an idea of who your wrestler is. We see a lot of wrestlers come and go in the IWA and never hear a word from them. And I remember seeing some of the names and being like, that's a cool name. I can't wait to see what that guy brings to the table. And nothing. And then I remember the name Jimmy North, who Becky Lipoff ran, or may run again. We don't know yet. But
we're hoping.
In the NWL, she wrote him as a great babyface. Canadian, clean cut, kind of, a good guy Randy Orton type who just took on the bad guys. Let me tell you, one thing about a positive of being a babyface is there's really no shortage of bad guys.
Yeah.
You just got to call them out. They'll come to you. Eventually, if you make enough heat on them and say, hey, you guys are afraid of me, face me in the ring, it'll fall together for you.
They'll be lining up.
Right. And that's the thing is if you're a good guy, it's like Hulk Hogan in the old days. Hogan used to fight like King Kong Bundy, Big John Studd, Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, Don the Rock Morocco. He had 8 different guys chasing him, but anyone he fought was a main event. And that's why if you're a good guy, it really behooves you to say, if you want to learn how to write a good guy, it can't be hard. Watch some promos. And that's another thing I would say to players too. Go on YouTube and just look up promos. Look up think about if you want your wrestler to kind of be like a Dusty Rhodes character, Look up Dusty Rhodes promos. You want to be more like a Junkyard Dog? Look up Junkyard Dog. Write your promo with an accent. Yeah. Mad Dog Dick Jackson's from the Deep South. He speaks, it's all my gods and,
wrestling.
Wrestling. Victor Von Schnapp's from Australia, so he speaks with an Australian accent. A lot of, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that to you. He really, plays into it. Senor Luchas, from Mexico. And if you bring that polish to your character, it helps us a lot. Now, one thing I will say too, for your trash talk is imagery. If you draw your own wrestler, great. Send your images to the commissioners. Whether it's myself or Alex, because it or Andy or James Ross and IWL or any commissioner really, because if we have images to work with when we put our reports together, or the IWA report or whatever it may be, we can insert those images into the report.
Absolutely.
And it makes the news stories look better. It makes the angles look, the cover. People keep saying, like, I want to be on the cover. If you trash talk, like, I'll give you an example. We recently did a cover with King Klondike. And Alex, you can probably speak to this better than I can. But recap how he got on that cover.
Well, he went out and he got his own picture done by Warner Murrick. He joined the Facebook page. He was on our message board, and early on we saw that he had a passion for what he was doing, and he really, really put some effort in. And then reading his trash talk was fantastic. So right off the bat, I threw him on a match on the main event, which ended up having Killer Clown coming down, and he wrestled the Bear. I forgot to mention that. He wrestled the Bear on the main event as the opening match, and then Killer Clown came down, whacked the Bear in the head with a chair, and then he comes out with a T-shirt with the Bear on it. We love that, so he got fast tracked to the cover, and that's literally all it takes.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. It's like the better storylines you give us and the better imagery. Because one thing I talk about a lot of players is that they'll say, I want my wrestler to be Roman Reigns or Seth Rollins or Daniel Bryan. On our side of things, production-wise, creatively, it helps us to have multiple images. Because if we have 7 guys trying to be Roman Reigns for their image, we're going to lose it in translation. Because I've had players already say to me, like, well, I thought this guy was so-and-so. Yeah. So if you think of a wrestler, and granted, one thing about wrestling is if you use a popular wrestler, there's going to be a lot of images out there of them, which makes our job much easier.
Definitely.
If you draw your own wrestler, great. If you get your drawing done by a friend or by a professional like Warner, you might say, well, it's going to cost me some money. I have a PayPal account that I put money aside in just to purchase another drawing for him from another wrestler, and that wrestler drawing will go on a cover. So it's like, I know it might be some money, but it's worth it, and that's the thing is that, if you're looking to really enjoy this game and create characters that people talk about, King Klondike, fun character. He went inactive this cycle, and both Alex and I were like, oh man, no, not him, because those are the characters we like to read. We want to see how they get involved, who they're feuding with, and where their characters will grow. One of my favorite characters in the last year or two is Ghostly Shadows. Mm. And he is a player that came in, and he brought a lot creatively to the table.
I stole stuff from him.
Really?
Yeah. So he does a thing where, if you noticed in my trash talk recently, like it has like the background image, and then it's writing over it.
Yes.
I stole that from him. I steal stuff from everybody.
No, but that's cool. But that's the thing. It's like that's the kind of impact player. Now, what he did with Ghostly Shadows, and give you kind of the fun story about this. Here's a player who made this character that's called Ghostly Shadows, who's kind of like a cross between the Undertaker and Sting, except he's evil. He paints his face. Now, what he did is he used the image from the band called Ghost, which if you haven't checked them out, check them out. I went to see them live, best concert I've ever been to. He had this image of this guy leading the Disciples of Doom. And he has all these wrestlers. He has El Barbaro, Saskatchewan Sasquatch, Willie the Wild Woodsman, and Elijah the Mountain Man. That's off the top of my head. He has other wrestlers too, I think. Oh, Randy the Ram. Yeah. But this player created a wide variety of wrestlers with different personalities, and he plays them all off very well. It's rare enough to see a player write one wrestler well. He writes 5 or 6 well. So, the better you do, the more you give us to work with, the more we can do to produce a better report that might reflect, the game and, draw your interest. Because, I got a player, he framed the cover we did of he made the cover, and he framed it. So actually I went out and I have little frames of like some of my wrestlers, and like, because I'm a nerd.
Mark.
I'm a mark, yeah. But it's absolutely, we do mark out for players that come in and do a really good job. And I mean, I don't have the end bill in front of me right now, but like the fact that I can name 3 to 5 wrestlers You know, it's a tribute. You know, Rock Simpson, Killer Clown. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, Jimmy North, Lumberjack, Zach James just graduated and came to the BRL.
You got your Ghetto Master. You got your Mike
Oh my God!
Masons.
Right.
Yeah,
You know,
your Shane Lees.
and the way to look at it too is the NWL is where you develop your character. You know, so you figure out who your wrestler is. So when your wrestler graduates into the IWA at large, whether it's an IWAR league or if you go to another league, another federation, wherever you choose to go, if you're a trash talk fan, I would suggest checking out the leagues you're looking into. Spend a few bucks, check out those leagues. But if you develop your character and you like that style of play, then go where people enjoy it as well. Yeah. Because one of the worst things that I see happen is that players who love to trash talk, love to be interactive, they go to these leagues and it's dead. And there's no trash talk, no response, and then they're out of the game. And it's like, you know, you feel bad because these players brought a lot to the table. We want to see that thrive. So we're here to help you. So if you ever have questions about the characters, what type to create or what direction to go, we're happy to offer our advice. You know, we're here to help you ultimately. Because the better we help you, the better you're going to do. And the better you play, the more fun it is for us.
And the one thing I want to talk about too, just kind of circling back for a moment, is the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of the game.
Right.
I mean, that's real simple. You take Luther Alexander for an example. He has a logo, so all his logos are on the trash talk. So when you flip to a page, you know it's him right off the top. So it's like, you know, he's very identifiable. That picture that I spent money on, I use that for everything. So it's been on the cover of the IWA ringside. I use it literally every cycle, and I Photoshop it out, and then I put a new background on it. And it's always something ridiculous, something awesome. So if you have skills in terms of graphics, if you have skills in terms of Photoshop, use those skills. Actually, I didn't know Photoshop before I started playing this game, and I learned it. So you can broaden your horizons that way. So, you know, having a template for your trash talk that, you know, that's very appealing to the eye, that can catch attention, that's one way you could, you know, do it too. I mean, you'll see the paragraphs, so you see the people who just email their stuff in, and that's fine, and that's great, and I dig that. But it all looks the same. How are you going to make yourself stand out? How are you going to make yourself look different? And actually, I do help guys out with images and stuff like that as well. So they'll come to me, they'll send me a trash talk, I'll add a couple of stuff in it, make it look cool or whatever. They like it, they send it in. So, you know, they can, you know, get an overall reaction that way. Then, you know, they might miss your trash talk if it's a, like, you know, a small paragraph on the corner somewhere, or it's, you know, hidden behind the battle royal, and they won't see it. I'm not telling you to write a page, because if I had the skill enough not to write a page, I wouldn't. If I can get my point across in about 3 sentences, I probably would do that, and then a giant picture. Pictures are worth 1,000 words, right? So, you know, those are my thoughts. You know, again, it's more, the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. You know, think about logos. Think about adding non-playable characters, is what I call them. Luther has a bunch. He has his attorney, Clarence Cochran. He has his manager, Uncle Ivan. Now he has Roxy Extreme. I'd robbed the robot for a while, which was a gift from Johnny Revolution. He got burned in a fire. So
Yeah.
when our good friends Crazy Carl and the Phantom Striker burned down the Alexander Asylum. The Alexander Asylum in general, that's a character. You know,
Right.
it's based on a, you know, psychiatric ward that was here out in Long Island where I live. That's closed down. My dad used to work there, and you know, so the character is that, you know, him and Johnny Revolution Senior bought it and then turned it into, you know, a wrestling arena, and that's where the NWL main event takes place from. So again, it's about creating characters, you know, within your characters as you get to more advanced levels in terms when you get more confident in your trash talk overall. But don't be afraid that, you know, have a manager, have a valet, or have some sort of shenanigans. You know, even I invented my own kind of, you know, people that I beat up all the time, like Make a Wish Jimmy, who is a, you know, Make a Wish kid that that Luther, you know, beat up, and he, you know, comes back for revenge, and I think he passed away recently. So that's up in the air. We don't know if he actually passed away or not. And then his, you know, there's
he was one of the lumberjacks in the handicap lumberjack match.
That's right. And he had, you know, his pregnant mom, who's been pregnant for 2 years, who constantly gets super kicked. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So, you know, I do a lot of stuff with celebrities too. So I did something where, you know, Luther Alexander was, you know, hanging out with Kanye West, which automatically gets him heat. He went to the when they held the Olympics in Russia. He went and attacked the male figure skating judge. So those were just, that was nonsense. That had nothing to do with anything, but it got attention.
Right.
When he tried to become a citizen, he super kicked Clarence Thomas, the Supreme Court judge. So
I forgot about that.
Yeah, so you can do a lot of, it's funny, it's shenanigans, but I think everyone understands how dangerous that character is. And,
Yeah.
if you ever feuded with them, and again, I'm one of those guys who cast a wide net, and I'm currently feuding with quite a bit of wrestlers for a long time. I think Superstar Rick Riley's been a year. Great David's been a year. We're talking about 6 or 7 cycles with both, Rowdy Vestigini and Rude Duty. So, feuding with Luther is not a scenario where it's going to be 2 cycles and you're out.
Well, and that brings up a good point too. Is that you shouldn't put yourself into a short frame time. Like, don't put a timetable on it necessarily. For example, like the Rick Riley thing with Luther was Luther, Phantom Striker, and Robbie Blood attacked him at the award ceremony in January of 2015, right?
Yeah.
And no, 2014.
Yeah, 2004, yeah, you're right. 2014.
And then I took Rick out of the game for a year and didn't even have him. And then he came back after his coma and came back for revenge. Or was it last? It was last. I'm sorry, 15. It was right. You're 15.
Was it 15?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so he was basically out of the game for whatever, and it sold the fact he wanted revenge. And the idea was that he was going to go back and basically what you can do too with your feuds is you can pass the baton. So for example, at WrestleRama 10, there was a mystery referee for the handicap lumberjacks match. And that ended up being Rude Duty, who's also feuding with Luther Alexander. So he cost him the match and gave the win to Rick Riley, who then kind of basically, metaphysically passed the baton,
right,
to Rude Duty to now carry on their feud, and Rick and Luther are done.
And I just want to be clear that we didn't do nothing with the character in between either. Every couple of cycles, we would do something hilarious with the Rick Riley character to keep him front of mind.
That was Weekend at Bernie's thing.
Yeah.
Was the treatment he got. My favorite was when you were beating up behind Johnny B's back. That was fun.
We did the thing where he's in the wheelchair and he's in his coma, and then I throw him down his flight of stairs.
Right.
All kinds of shenanigans. I think they took him out to a strip club once, which is ridiculous.
Right, and the thing too is I remember we all mentioned non-character NPCs if you're a D&D player, non-player characters. You have figures, for example, the Teamster is the IWAR commissioner. Suplex is the BRL executive producer. You have Johnny B, the man who created the game, John Bruning. We've always had Johnny B as his on-air persona, and we've kept that spirit as part of the game. And Johnny B represents the IWA president. He's sort of like the big wig you don't mess with, And that's the thing is that one thing you can do is call it your league's commissioner, demand a title shot, demand this, demand if you're a bad guy, demand preferential treatment. If you're a good guy, demand that the promoter give you the match against the enemy you want to face. If he won't face you in the ring, you set that match up with chain match, so he can't run from me. One thing to keep in mind too, when it comes to trash talk, is think of longevity of the feud is the life of the feud. I've had Senior Lucha feuding with the Empire of Chaos for almost 2 years now, but it's gone through these life cycles where a mentor to Alex Styles, and then Alex Styles won the IWAR World Championship again, and then he turned on him right away and pile drove him. And then it's had this whole blood feud, and now it's gone around the whole way around where they've won the match at WrestleRama, and now he has to join the Empire of Chaos. So it's you can go different directions with it. You don't have to make your character a bad guy and always be a bad guy. You can make them good. Right now in the LWL, there's a whole thing where Atari's kind of turning good. So, while I might play Atari as the super evil bad guy villain, the situation has changed. So keep in mind too, when Randy Savage turned face, what made him turn face? Well, they went after Elizabeth. He was defending her honor. The fans got behind him.
Yep.
And
he didn't change his character because he's basically the same character.
Exactly. And then when he lost his shit and attacked Hulk Hogan, it was a phenomenal turn.
Yeah.
And it was believable. That's the thing about it. Make your character as believable as possible, because the more believable and I'll give an example. There's a character called the Extreme Icon Hannibal. He writes some really good promos. So when you see him, it's nice. They're really well written, and they usually do a good job calling people out or setting up an angle. Another one's Mr. Magnificent, Jamie Montgomery in the LWL. Jamie writes phenomenal promos. One of my favorite wrestlers in the game is El Hijo de Armas Archuleta. I hope I said it right. Who is the son of Armas Archuleta, who was the most popular wrestler in the IWA back in the 2000s when they had the Mid-Atlantic Region League. And that's the thing is this game's been around since 1985. There are wrestlers now that are third generation in the game alone. So you really can do a lot with it and have fun with it, you know? And that's why I think the more you put into it, the more you'll get out is really a good way to look at it. You know, if you just play the game for the numbers, that's fine. That's your choice. You can do that. There are plenty of leagues to play in. But I would always suggest that if you're not a player who likes the trash talk and you don't really care about it, then don't play in a league that does, because I understand you're wanting to play in that league and be part of the action, but you're hurting the gameplay of somebody else who enjoys that style. You know, it's like if you don't care about it, like if I didn't care about trash talk, I'd play in like the dead leagues because I'd just check on the front page of the bulletin and be done with it. But if you do, then I say find a league you like that suits the style of play you like, and have fun with it.
You know, taking this to be a little bit more NWL specific, there are characters in the NWL that you can definitely use. You know, there is Pierre Roulette, who is our color commentator. We have Samantha Soley, who is our play-by-play. We use Dapper Dan, which is fantastic.
Dapper Dan D.
You have Uncle Ivan, who is technically the head trainer there as well. And I'll give you an example that we took a feud that was a Chief Red Fox. Did a thing where he mentioned he had horses. So I put a thing in the IWAR ringside that Samantha wanted to go horseback riding with him. So they went horseback riding. At that time, Mike Mason was feuding with them. And we did a thing where Revolution X killed the damn horse that they rode in on literally. What it did, it transferred the feud because I knew those guys were leaving to Samantha Soley. So now we have Mike Mason who's feuding with the play-by-play commentator, and then we take it to the next level was when she talks about him. She talks to him with disgust. So when she's calling a match for him on the pay-per-view or on the main event, she hates this guy's guts. And then by the time Mike gets to leave, she will get her her big win, I guess. We haven't figured that out yet. That's coming soon. But
right.
using these characters, using a Pierre Roulette who does host a show, which you can email if you want. Email me if you want to be on the show. I think we're gonna have a show. We're gonna have a show this cycle. Chris Smith actually got in contact with me. He's going to be featured on the show. So,
nice.
So use those characters around you. You want to make it into its own world, all into its own. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right, that's all the time we have for today. We'll see you next time on the IWAR Network TubeCast. Have a great night.